Covering up for Nathan Robinson, who's the project lead, unfortunately unable to be here today. This presentation will give an overview of the insights we have generated from Soil Indicators Survey, which is high-level aggregated data, and I'll also touch a little bit on the next steps of this project. So soil indicator research in Australia has largely focused on examining one user group in one agricultural setting and in one geographical region. There were three recent studies funded by Soil CRC in 2018, which focused on soil indicators, soil classifications, and soil amelioration techniques in our farming systems. The research findings highlight the importance of soil indicators as a function and facilitator of farming systems in Australia. The scoping studies also recommended future research should focus on finding out what our farmers are using, what soil indicators are our farmers using, and what are the motivations behind using those soil indicators, hence this project. So some soil properties such as soil texture or depth to impermeable layer are relatively fixed and do not change much over time. And then there are other soil properties which are sensitive to change, and these are the properties which enable to identify problems in the soil for desired land use. These are called indicators. So for the purpose of this research, we define indicators as lab tests, measurements, or observations, along with the assessment and interpretation of the measured value against standards to indicate the meaning of the measured value in relation to inherent soil characteristics. An interesting observation was we realized before the survey that a lot of farmers do not understand the word indicator. Hence, the survey had to go through a lot of refinement before it was rolled out to make sure our participants, the farmers, understand the meaning of what we are asking them. So we use the terms tests, measurements, observations for the ease of understanding, and these terms are used interchangeably throughout this research project. The aim of the research was to explore the application of soil indicators used by Australian farmers to measure the soil performance on their properties. The four key questions we wanted to ask were: what soil indicators are being used, at what frequency are being used, what are the motivations behind using those indicators, like what are the farmers looking at the indicators when they're deciding whether to use or not to use, and how are they receiving the information about soil indicators. So the research utilized quantitative research methods, specifically a survey, to gather data from farmers and associated agricultural stakeholders, including advisors, extension officers, researchers, consultants, and industry representatives. The survey was disseminated through 10 groups to target a representative of different land uses, agricultural enterprises, and agroecological zones represented by the Soil CRC. We received 330 responses for the survey, out of which we only used 265 as the others were either incomplete or they were received from overseas. So although the number of received responses were not large, the point to note here is that they were very detailed, comprehensive information that we received in the survey. We'll be only showing high-level information, unfortunately, in the time permitted. So majority of the responses were from farmers, followed by advisors and then researchers. The responses represented a range of agricultural sectors, including grains, livestock, cotton, sugar, horticulture, and mixed farming enterprises. We received the largest response from grains industry, 50%, which includes oilseeds, pulses, and cereals. There was 21% participation from the cattle industry, which includes both beef and dairy. 15% of total responses were received from the sheep industry, which includes both lamb and wool. Cotton, sugar, and horticulture were each represented by less than 5% of the responses, and hence they are not included going forwards in this presentation. It is also evident from the map that the grains industry was majorly represented, and sugar and cotton producing regions are less represented. So there was a question asked about how often do you do a soil test on your property. So above 40% of farmers and advisors conduct soil tests every 2 to 5 years, and little under 40% of farmers and advisors conduct soil tests yearly. All the advisors conduct soil tests, although at different frequencies. When we look at it from the enterprise perspective, the grains and sheep enterprises, above 40% participants test their soil either yearly or every 2 to 5 years, and cattle enterprise, 47% participants test their soil every 2 to 5 years. So we presented 56 tests in the survey. There were 17 observations, 19 chemical tests, 6 physical tests, and 14 biological tests, for which the options of frequency of use were either in season, yearly, every 2 to 5 years, or never used. We received very detailed responses for the frequency of use from the grains, cattle, and sheep industry. We are only showing the most and least used tests or indicators here. Amongst the observations and assessments, paddock walk or drive and plant growth or yield were being used by almost all the participants. Testing for available phosphorus, soil pH, or organic carbon ruled the chemical tests. In terms of biological tests, the test for root health and rooting depth was conducted by most of the participants. Least used tests were the same across all the 3 enterprises. Planted down force was the least used observation. Chemical residue was the least used chemical test. Gene abundance was the least used biological test. So this is an interesting graph here, which shows the percentage of participants who never use these tests. What stands out immediately here is that chemical tests and in-field observations of crops and soil are the most used ways of monitoring soil quality for a particular land use. But what stands out here is the bars at the end, the green bars, they're the biological tests. They are the least used of all the tests presented in the survey. There's more reliance on chemical testing and visual appraisal than on biological tests. Biological tests needs to be calibrated, adjusted to other conditions, and that is why it's difficult to interpret them. There are general concerns about the absence of standardized standards relating to biological tests that we found out through our survey. Here are some of the quotes from farmers which provide some insights for not using biological tests. And the common themes in these quotes revolve around concerns and uncertainties regarding the use and interpretation of biological tests in agriculture. So many reasons for why soil tests are not being used were identified in this research. One of the main reasons that stood out was the cost associated with testing. And with the earlier slide, we saw the test for chemical residues was one of the least used tests. One of the reasons could be attributed to the cost because they're not a part of the standard testing packages. So it's an extra cost to our farmers to conduct these tests. An interesting reason was that they haven't done the test before, so they don't see the value in conducting it because they don't know how it can be useful. So this relates to education and literacy around soil indicators. Then there was a question asked about how would you like to receive information about soil indicators? Through whom and through what medium? So we realized people-centered interactions are the preference for receiving information. In the past, talking to your neighbor or farmer was important, but the choices are changing now, and our farmers are preferring scientifically informed, professionally given advice. Important information for the grower groups is that the farm days conducted by them hold so much value for the farmers and advisors to receive information. Even previous studies has found that farmers prefer seeing the method explained and work at a local property rather than just through podcasts. So we also found that many farmers do not use research papers or read them, as Matthew highlighted in his talk earlier. The reliance of farmers on advisors is also highlighted, and if this trend continues, then soil indicator projects may need to consider where best to direct their capacity building activities. From the survey, the key takeaways are the most used indicators for all enterprises were chemical test and visual appraisal of soils and crop. Farmers are undertaking soil tests on a regular basis, hence the conclusion that farmers recognize the importance of soil testing to understand how the soil is performing. The main reason for using tests and assessments are that they are relevant to their farming enterprise and management practices, and that the ease of sampling and understanding the results. And finally, farmers' choices of soil indicators is largely driven by in-person interactions, such as those with advisors and grower groups. So the survey has identified indicators being used by farmers, also by advisors and agronomists. This information will be useful in the next phase of this project because it will be about indicators that matter, tailored for specific agroecological zones in relation to the soil, landscape and management practices. So co-design workshops will be conducted with project members that include Southern Farming System, West Midlands Groups, AREP, Holbrook Landcare Network, and Central West Farming Systems. Domain experts, leading agronomists, and farmers will be critical to developing fit-for-purpose soil indicators tailored for their region. This will leverage and build upon work developed already through Soil CRC and existing resources. So this is the team, project team. And this is a draft of the proposed framework for soil performance metrics linked to indicators. So soil indicators will be matched to the agricultural purpose in the context of when they are measured and how the indicator value relates to a baseline and the acceptable range of the measure for that purpose, along with corrective actions and management decisions. So this is what we are expecting to do in the next phase with our project partners. We would like to acknowledge the Soil CRC, all project partners and those who completed the survey for us. Thank you.